All right, welcome back to the Militia Madness MTG podcast. Today, we're going to be, much like we did 2 podcasts ago, we're going to be continuing like an archetype overview type thing. And today, we're talking about control decks. So, before that, I do have a Militia MTG Spotlight. And I'm going today, and my card is Goblin Matron. This card is 2 and a red for a 1/1. Search your library for a goblin card and put it into your hand. I like this card a lot because it breaks singleton rules. And anytime you can have more consistent access to stuff than your opponent does, I think you're a leg up. And goblins is a really, really deep tutor pool. Finds a lot of interesting things that you might not think of. It can find a removal spell with Tarfire or the Changeling one, Crib Swap. It can also find aggressive threats. I don't so much like it in control decks, but I think if you're an aggressively slanted mid-range deck, I think this card is very, 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 very good. The goblins are just, even in mono red, very, very, very powerful.
Yeah, like it is very nice to just be able to like search for something. So like it makes a lot of sense as like a good card to just throw in here and there, and then yeah, especially if like you do like end up. I don't know if there was like a full Goblin Commander, but like that would be very helpful to find your toolkit.
Yeah. There's also like a goblin combo that exists. And this can find
Skirk
2
Prospector.
parts of it. Yeah, it can find Skirk Prospector or it can find the Persist Goblin. It can't find First Day of Class because it's not a goblin. But overall, it just has a lot of versatility in what it can search. And at its floor, it just finds like a good measure of what it does at its floor is the neutrinos deck tech. It really just like searches for a threat, searches for a removal spell, move on with your life. And also it it accesses changelings as well. So in a more mid-ranger deck, it can find the Changeling Wayfinder to go find a land, which is good. It just does a lot for a 3-mana 1/1. It just does a lot of stuff. All right, now that we've talked about that, let's talk about control. So I think the first thing we should talk about is what is control, because I think it means different things to different people. To me, a control deck is a deck aimed at lengthening the game. We talked about aggro trying to close the game out as soon as possible. To me, a control deck or a classic control deck is a deck in which you want to interact with your opponent in such a way that the more turns exist and you kill them with some 5, 6, 7 drop or something like that. On turn 6, 7, you're not like ramping out a 5 drop on turn 3. That's a different deck. You're trying to like interact, remove their thing, draw some cards, and fight them on an axis that isn't necessarily entirely board based.
Yeah, like I think personally, like along those lines, like I agree that it's like slowing down the game is a very good way to put it. I also think like a good like keyword to get in there for like how I would define a control deck is reactivity versus proactivity.
Yeah.
Like just making sure that no matter what your opponent's doing, you are always ready for it, rather than saying the way that I'm ready for it is by making you answer me.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an interesting point too, because I do think some control decks, I think like Delver in legacy formats gets a lot of weird stuff because it's an aggro control deck and like you don't really see that a lot. But Delver is a very proactive threat in an otherwise very reactive deck.
Yeah.
You can like control decks can also be very much like Protect the King type thing, where you establish an early threat, and Delver's a great example of this. It happens in Simic a lot, where you like play a Cloudfin Raptor or an Experiment one or whatever, and as the game goes on, you're just protecting that threat and stuff like that. And I think that deck is also has some roots in control and some roots in aggressive. But I think, yeah, I think the better way is like it's trying to lengthen the game and it's trying to interact, right? That's the kind of thing that control decks are trying to do. Where aggro decks can kind of get away with not interacting. Like, I don't need to care. Like, I'll kill your thing if I need to kill your thing. But apart from that, I'm trying to do my own thing. Where control decks need to do their thing, they need to interact with your thing to make sure you're not killing them. They're less like, you're right. They're less like play a guy, play a guy, play a guy, kill what I need to. More, I'll play a threat when I need to play a threat, but only when I can protect that threat, or only when the game has gone long enough to where it's time for me to take control of it. Control decks, what I'm saying is control decks a lot of times take a back foot at several points of the game where I'm not the one dictating stuff, but I need to interact so I can get to the point where now I'm the one dictating pace, and now you're in trouble.
Yep, and generally, like, how they'll do that is they'll with the amount of like pressure they sacrifice, they'll generally be gaining resources, and that's where you'll see like the card draw and such come in, and that's how they can afford to make the trade-off of not getting as ahead on board early.
Yeah, their advantage is not in life. They're really trying to use that life as a resource to establish time to draw cards or to remove what I need to remove and that kind of thing. I will say control in our format is different because I think our format is aggressively slanted enough to where you can't really answer every threat. Like, that's not a thing you're going to be able to do. So you need to find other ways of doing things. And I think the quintessential control deck in our format is a blue-black deck that uses things like Delver, Cryptic Serpent, Tellurian Terror, Sword Coast Serpent, and Murmuring Mystic to close out games. And you have to really Sneaky Snacker as well, stuff like that. But you really have to go in with a very conceived plan of this is how I'm winning the game and this is how I'm interacting early. You just can't. There are some control decks in other formats that can, like, Wrath of God you, right? Like, Wraths are very, very important in control decks. And the Wraths that exist in our format are just, be honest with you, they're crap. They don't wipe the board reliably against 3/3s.
Yeah, the best we
You
got
know
is
what I mean?
Pyroclasms generally. Well, you get like
Yeah.
Crypt Rats and stuff like that, which can go a little higher, but yeah.
Sure, but that hits you as well. And it's also a one of, right? It doesn't necessarily gain you life against the burn decks, right? You have to take damage to do that. So, but yeah, I think you and I would both agree the Wraths in this format are just worse. Supreme Verdict and Wrath of God laugh at them in comparison. So you need to be able to deal with early stuff. So like Augur of Bolus and things like that, like early blockers are really, really good. Or a commander like Obira or like Vohar or something, like commanders that can come in and do something early are really, really important in control decks in this format as well.
Yeah, like that's honestly like I think a lot of the power you can get from a control deck in this format is by playing a like maybe lower cost or like semi-aggressive commander that can contest the board nicely, because it also means that like as the game goes a little later, you can also replay them a lot of times, which gives you a lot of actual pressure from basically not a card in your deck. So you don't have to like worry about that as like a deck building restriction as much.
Yeah, you just need to have a more proactive plan because a lot of the aggro decks are super powered. Boros is going to be what Boros is. It's just the aggressive decks have so much more tools than you do, because if they go wide, you really have nothing to say about it. Like, there's no counter response that exists apart from Crypt Wraps and like Arms of Adar and Suffocating Fumes.
Yeah,
But God help you. Yeah. But God help you if they have 3 toughness. You're in a world of hurt. So I think you need to, not saying that I think control decks are bad, I think you just need to build them differently to where you have a plan of either you need a lot more removal than you think, like a lot, or you need to be on more defensive blockers. You know.
Yeah, and like I think that was like a trend like you could see in like non singleton popper as well, because like you would see like the blue terror decks like always running like as you said like a bunch of augur bolts and stuff like that to help gum up the board, because
Mm-hmm.
they do have like good ways to end games, but like they also need ways to like survive the early onslaught, and stopping an attack every turn is almost as good as removing the creature until you at least draw like one of your ways
Yeah.
to fully remove it, or
Yeah.
draw
The
your
thing
way to
about
outscale it.
yeah, the problem with that deck and like a direct comparison is the issue with our format is we don't get four ofs, and
Yep.
that sounds well. A, that sounds obvious, but and B, that sounds like what that big of a deal. It means we don't have four scred four lightning bolts, so it means to get those same numbers, we have to find 8 individual cards that do that same thing, and that's not easy.
Yep.
Because once you go through like your go for the throats and your cast downs, the third cast down is notably worse.
Yeah.
It's
Unless
like
you're not
feed the
playing a black
storm.
deck, that is better because you could Doomblade.
Yeah, but even like Doomblade is questionable sometimes.
Yeah, but against non-black deck, it's
Um,
just the best one.
hmm Snuff Out is another one.
Yep.
But like but you get my point. Once you get to that third slot that like normal pauper decks don't touch because they're just like 4 cast down, 4 growth throat or whatever. Things get a lot hairier in black specifically. Red, not so much. You go from bolts to shocks, essentially.
Yep.
Um,
Or like
and
going
there's
to bolts
really
that
good
can't hit the
stuff.
face, or like conditional bolts, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but then you're going from like 1 to 2 a lot of the times. Like the 3 best bolts are what? Like lightning bolt, chain lightning, galvanic discharge.
Yeah, generally.
And then and now you're at shocks. But that's kind of my point. Is like you run out of these playable cards a lot quicker than you think you do. Unless you increase the mana. But like you can't efficiently remove every threat in a control deck in this format is the point I'm trying to make. So you need to be able to do you need to be able to find answers to other stuff. So you're gonna have to play like the creatureless control decks that exist in other formats. I don't think they exist here. You have a creature in your command zone, obviously, but that's not the point. Like I just think that you got to put Gurmag Anglers and Thought Scours and Mental Notes to power out your Cryptic Serpents, your Gurmag Anglers, and your Tolarian Terrors. I think if you want to build a control deck, that's how you have to build it. Because even like Green Goblin, which is like another really control-y version, um, I think it was just really, really high in creatures on that deck as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and like to be fair, like controlling the board is a form of control as well. Like if you're the one who's like on the board, like owning this, like the whole game state, then like that is its own form of control. So
You're an aggro deck.
it depends on like exactly what your creatures are doing and at
I
their costs.
don't think it does. Because if you're putting creature and creature and creature and creature and creature and creature and creature onto the board and you're controlling it that way, that's not a control deck. That's like an aggro deck playing badly. Like if you have more creatures than your opponent does by a considerable amount, and that's how you got control of the board, you're either the defender's deck, which is a combo deck, or you're an aggro deck who's just not taking the opportunity to attack when you should be. Because the great example of this is the most recent militia video, right? Enos versus Tam. I think both of us in game 1 should have been attacking. They just weren't. It was just a really weird. Go check that game out. It's really weird.
I at least don't think I should have been
Evil,
attacking because there were a lot of states where my creatures were just smaller than yours, so I would have been like
yeah,
slowly getting my board state chipped away by attacking. But yeah,
yeah. I don't remember the life totals because sometimes that's okay. And in that instance, yeah, I had a Basilisk game on the board. Maybe you're right, but I should have been. I think. I think I should have been just trading through your flyers because I have more flyers than you do in my deck, or I have access to more flyers theoretically.
Yeah.
The blue deck should have more access than the white deck. But um, yeah, like it's one of those situations where if both of you is okay with something happening, one of you is wrong. Right? Like an opponent and it's just it feels weird to me to
Yeah.
call those control
I
decks.
will say, like, with the statement of, like, if both of you think it's this okay, one of you is wrong, the only awkwardness about that is if both of you are playing around a little bit of hidden information, because then both of you could be right if your hidden information that you're guessing about is right, but you don't know if
Yeah,
it's right.
yeah. But again, 80% of the time, my
Yeah.
statement will reign supreme. But
Well, yeah, but that's if you have perfect information of both of your hands.
sure. Um,
Man.
what was I gonna say? Yeah, I think like if you're trying to put a bunch of creatures into play and go wide, I think there are just more that suits an aggro deck because you can turn that into winning the game a lot easier in an aggressive deck. Like just play an Anthem and kill them. You know, what are you waiting for? Your win condition is right there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I
like,
don't know if I agree with you.
I guess going back to the example is in that game like that we played, that's what I was waiting for was the anthem.
Yeah, yeah. But again, an Enos deck is not like you're not trying to. You have so many aggressive tools. You're not trying to lengthen the game out. I think you're still more favored. You were against green blue, so it couldn't have happened. But like if you're trying to do that against a blue black deck, they arms of Adar you and then you die. Like that board that you had is a wrathable board.
Well, yeah, but also like if it was against the blue black deck, they probably would have gotten into the same board stall situation. So it's just kind of thing of like you play. Well, yeah, but what I mean is like it's the kind of thing of like you play completely differently in completely different like board states and different decks, especially like since we know your color pair like going into the matchups here. It's like I can like go into each matchup intending to play a different game state like from turn one because I know what my opponent's doing color wise guaranteed.
I don't know if you can make the case that Enos is a control deck.
I would
It's
not.
very much not. Yeah. You
But
were though. Weren't you?
No. I said you can play a board-based control game, and then we separately talked about Enos as a game. These were two separate ideas, but
those aren't controlled. Like we're talking about the control deck, and neither of those really fits. Like a control deck doesn't want to like play a creature, and never interact with you. That's not what a control deck wants to do. They want to play just enough creatures, hold back just enough things until they can establish
like
their win condition.
What I would call creature control is like poorly statted but good ability creatures, like playing Kitesail freebooters and brain maggots.
Yeah, but that's not possible. Like the Kitesail freebooters and brain maggots that exist in our formats are ravenous rats. They are so much worse. So it's not. Well, it's not that you're wrong. It's just
I have played a control deck like that at one point. It just and I think I went fine because that was my Esper deck was playing those kind of effects and blinking them, and focusing more on like the onboard value.
Yeah. You can control decks can absolutely put speed bumps, but I think when you're at a point of like when you're trying to go and do that kind of stuff, I think it presents a fork, right? It presents like I'm trying to go a bunch of creatures and then slam. Well, how are you trying to do that, right? Like if you're trying to put like 1/3s and 1/2s and that's your force, yeah, I can see the argument that you're maybe a little bit controlly because now you're dealing 1 damage at a time, and that's very much like let's extend the game as long as we can, let's disrupt. But if your game plan is to like, oh, I'm putting this Elite Interceptor into my deck. Elite Interceptor to me is very much an aggressive card. And you saw it be very much an aggressive card in game 2 where it trounced me. Just being able to tap a guy and then attack in, having a 1-drop and attack in and all this kind of stuff. Like I think a control deck is less focused on like you want bodies to block and buy time, not necessarily going wide and then using your board advantage to kill them. To me, that seems much more aggressive because it's aided with like anthems, and I wouldn't say Rally the Peasants is a control card.
I wouldn't
Or
either.
Guardians, Pledge, yeah, stuff like that. So I don't know if like putting stuff on the board, that's a thing a control deck can do, but I think if you're creating a board stall with aggressive creatures, I think you're trying to do something very weird.
Yeah, and like
and confused.
I do agree with that as well. Like I just think a creature-based control deck is not necessarily playing aggressive creatures; they're playing like more weirdly statted creatures and stuff like that, or like creatures with very specific abilities, and like it is a possible
Yeah.
thing. But
No, I agree that like Augur of Bolus, putting it into play, you're aiming to like block and buy time. And again, the defender deck as well and stuff like that. It's just building a board to me seems a lot more but maybe that's unique to our format. Maybe you do have to do that a lot more because as I said earlier, the wraths are just worse. So yeah, no, I can see what you're saying. I see the point, but I don't know if it's like how many creatures do you think the average control deck would play?
I think at least 8 and then up to like 16 if you're like going into like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it depends because now that I'm thinking about it, like Obira was on like 12 or 13 or something like that. But that's as much of a kindred deck
Yeah, and I, like
as
for
anything else.
the people at home, like this is in comparison to like if you're playing like a hard control deck in a 60 card like constructed format like Modern Legacy, you would see 4 to 8 creatures tops.
Yes. Yeah. Those control decks, yeah, the creature count is probably higher in our format solely because our interaction isn't actually that much worse. Like our counter spells are fine. Our counter spells fall off a cliff if you get into the later game, if you're not playing the 3-mana ones. That like the harder control decks definitely want to be on. I think I've criminally underplayed the 3-mana counter spells in a lot of decks.
Yeah.
Because those like your only ways of answering stuff later on. Because everything in this format is so cheap. Your average mana cost is just so much lower than a lot of other formats. But yeah, our counter magic is worse. Our removal is, depending on your colors, is not necessarily worse, but you have to really work for some stuff. Like we're talking snuff out territory, that kind of thing.
Yeah, like Snuff Out's not bad, but it's also this like weird like
Yeah.
trade off against aggro decks where it's like kind of where you want to. Because it's like, oh, it's a free control spell, but then it's also like, well, I just took 4, so I do feel bad about it because it basically says, hey, I removed that 2/2 2 turns later than I actually did because I'm going to be taking 4 to remove it now.
But I guess is it time to wrap it up because I can give final thoughts.
We're about 22 minutes in, so like.
Okay, we can talk a little bit longer. But yeah, I guess like the big like if you're gonna do bullet point notes to like analyze what your deck like, and again, these archetype overviews are guidelines, right? Like you're gonna know what your deck wants to be when you're building it. And it's geek nomenclature, right? So as long as you know what your deck is trying to do, that's what's important, right? Because this format very much so, the more I play it, the more I realize you got to come into it with a plan. You can't just put a bunch of good cards in a deck and figure it out later. You're gonna lose. You have to have not necessarily like a defined game plan. Like I will play this card on one and play this card, but you have to have an idea of how you're ending games. And I've played a lot of control decks in other formats where that's not like I don't care. Like so many control players were like, winning is an afterthought.
Yeah,
right?
I've personally always been counter to those kind of control decks. Like I feel like you should at least put in some dedicated win con, even if it's as slight as like what like current like I go back to Modern a lot personally because it's my frame reference, but what current Modern control is, where it's just I will lock you out and then solitude you to death.
Yeah,
like just a 3/2 with flash you to death.
Yeah, but like even Flock won a Pro Tour with a deck that had no win conditions. Like right, they just didn't. I don't care.
It definitely
I
can
will.
win. I just think unless like
Mhm.
you're like a very skilled player, 90% of the time you're going to be handicapping yourself because you're just making it harder and harder for yourself to win.
Yeah. And well, I didn't say that they didn't have any. It was winning was an afterthought. So like they'll kill you with this celestial colonnade, or they'll kill you with this random 2/2 that they have into play. Again, beating down with solitude, right? You don't put that card in your deck as like I will kill them with solitude. It's a removal spell that you can also put into play, and it will kill them. You know, the one that I always go back to is like the Kahira, um, blue white control decks with no creatures in them. That type of thing, right? Like I have this 3/2 that's free, and I have to put it in my deck. It will kill you, rawr. That type of thing.
But yeah, I do believe that is actually the same deck that is like the Solitude deck because Kahira lets you play elementals.
Mm.
But yeah, it is just like a weird little bit there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the cool thing about Kahira though is you can pitch it to Solitude.
Yep.
But that's completely unrelated to the format we're talking about here.
But yeah, no, but those types of decks. And as a point, those types of decks I don't think exist in our
Yeah.
format. They just die. You will lose. You need to. That's the difference between like a lot of other formats and ours. Is even regular Pauper. Sometimes those decks can kind of sort of win, but
Yep.
this format is just so focused. You need to have a directive. You need to know how I'm winning the game. So, in general, I would say that the way the control decks win the game is they win the game through a longer game in general, and they win the game by interacting efficiently with the things that they need to interact with, and then they kill you with something: a Gurmag Angler, a Delver, a Tolarian Terror. But you have to put those slots in going, these are how I'm going to win the game. You can't just put an Augur of Bolus and hit them 20 times. That's never good enough
Yeah, it's gonna take
against
way
any
too
deck in our
long.
format. Yeah. You're just giving people way too much time to, because you can't lock people out either. Like the fact that you always have access to your commander means that in some matchups, if the commander's a threat, you're done as a control deck. You can't answer everything. You need to be able to at some point go, okay, now I'm gonna turn the corner with this murmuring mystic, or now I'm gonna, sometimes the now I'm gonna is now I'm gonna play this 2-card combo and kill you. Right? Like those, that's the thing you can do. But you need to have a defined game plan. You can't win as an afterthought
Yeah.
in this format. I think is the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that.
Yeah, you need to be doing something. It doesn't necessarily have to be Tolarian Terror. It doesn't necessarily have to be Cryptic Serpent, but those are just the ones I could think of in blue. Because I think, talking about the colors for like 2 seconds, blue to me is, as is the world, to me is a very control color. Black and red as well. I would say green is probably the lowest for me. Like in low to high, it's probably like green, white, and then Grixis.
Yeah.
So if that's the type of deck you're building,
I guess at least for this format anyway, because like you do get a lot more controlling out of white in other formats. You just with the rarity restriction limited yourself to like the only good option or the only great options being like sorcery speed and very limited.
Or enchantments that are very vulnerable to being blown up.
Yep.
That kind of thing. We don't get paths and rats
swords
and stuff
and all
like
that.
Yeah, white has been historically a controlled color at some point. It's just worse in Militia, which is what we're talking about.
Yep.
As a control color. It's a lot worse. When your best removal spell is Destroy Evil and Thraben Charm, real hard to be a control color.
Oh man.
All right, you got anything else to say?
I think that's it for the main bit of this. Cool.
Okay.
Just gonna.
Well then, let's do the podcast thing.
Yep.
Where I tell you what's going on for the rest of the week. So this week, this will be going up on, I believe, the 17th. So you just saw week 3 of the sealed progression series. So our next sealed progression will be our first post ban, but it will not be in 2 weeks, and I'll explain why it won't be in 2 weeks. We are doing something very, very special coming up this week. Morgan and I said early on with the sealed progression series, we are not going to do unsets or anything like that, just because when unsets are part of the game, they really define the part of the game, and they just make us do unfun things.
Yep.
So what we're going to be doing this week, starting on Monday, we will be doing a sealed episode of just unsets and mystery boosters. So Monday, you'll see my opening and my deck build. Wednesday, you will see Morgan's opening and their deck build. And on Friday, which will be our actual factual, I think, 100th video. Yes, it will.
Yeah.
We will play a game full of unsets and mystery boosters, playtest cards, and fun will be had by all. That'll take the place of the sealed progression episode that you'll be getting. Because the week after that, we're going to do a regular militia week. It's just easier. It took a lot of effort to get that 100th video episode in order. So it's just easier to film a militia thing. So you will be out with no sealed progression for the next 2 weeks. It also gives us time to reevaluate our collection because it was just a ban list. So it might have changed a lot about our collections and stuff like that. So it just gives us more time to do that. But we didn't have time to put a sealed progression episode up. But we're not quitting the series. It will be back. I promise. It's just gone on a 1-week hiatus because it's easier for us to film militia content than it is to film sealed progression content. Also, militia is in our channel name, so we figured you'd rather go a week without sealed progression than the thing that are in our channel.
Also, this is sealed anyway, so you can just use this as a super special detour.
Yep. Mm-hmm. But none of the cards we have will be in the sealed progression series.
Just gonna hit you with a flying mantis or a devil Knievel.
Yeah, I'm not gonna sneak a cheating face into play. It's not gonna happen. So yeah, that's what you can expect this week. And like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. And this is Hunter.
This is Morgan.
Signing out.